find faith on earth. I almost wondered about the one float that we saw today that said, we hope the Lord comes soon, especially before the election. Might be a nice idea, but it's probably not going to happen. Huh?
Yeah.
God looks for faith in us. And as we look at the readings today, what is the one word that is consistent? And that is persistence. The call to persevere. Whether we're looking at Moses, whose arms grew tired, and yet he knew he needed to keep them up because he could see what was happening when he didn't. Or whether we hear Paul talking to Timothy, stay persistent, don't give up the fight. Or Jesus himself, who tells us to be persistent in prayer, that it will pay off. And like Moses saying, my arms are getting tired, Lord. How much longer this battle for life for 40-some years now. And as we look at the battle for life, this pro-life month, today we're going to focus a little bit on euthanasia, which is the upcoming threat on innocent life. But as we do so, one of the words that also came up twice in the readings today is judge. There's only one judge who will be just, and that's God himself. In other words, if I were to ask you, do you believe that there is any level, any group of people who are without corruption? In other words, you could say, the popes? No. Do you think there's never been a pope without corruption? No. There's certainly been popes with corruption. Do you think any president has ever been without corruption? Of course, no. There's been presidents who have been corrupt. Every level of human leadership has its corrupt people. And so it has been throughout our history. It's always been. And so you and I recognize that, and in recognizing that, we see how that tension, a good tension, if you will, needs to be there, that we as a people of God must be persistent, supporting each other as Moses' own arms needed to be supported. We have to support each other in the fight for what we know is absolutely right. And what is that? Well, looking at Judges tonight, for example, of course, God is the just judge, but Jesus says, we have a dishonest judge. Can judges be persuaded and swayed? Yes, they can, by all kinds of things, right? And so, okay, if they can be persuaded, how do we do that? Our country, believe it or not, thought we had the absolute answer to that problem. And when we were founded, we said, okay, let's have supreme judges, but let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to give them an unbelievable salary, so they can't be tempted by money, right? And we're going to give them a position for life, so that they can't be threatened with early retirement. And it's like, you would think that'd be a magical formula, and they would happily serve for the money they're getting. Well, that seemed to be pretty good for a long time, until what I mentioned a couple weeks ago about Roe versus Wade, where we find the judges themselves saying, based on a penumbra of other laws, that we work hard at it, we can look at laws and we can do what we want. And then in the last 2 decades, several of them have been bold enough to say that the Constitution is a living document. Therefore, if it's a living document, it's subject to change. And if it's subject to change, then, golly, somebody's got to change it. And guess who that's going to be? Activist judges. We're no longer concerned about what the founding fathers of our country said in terms of basic rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, which come from God alone. Only God truly gives those rights. They don't come from the state. The state has an obligation to try to protect them. And as we look at that responsibility, we recognize that a number of judges, while they have a tremendous salary, while they have a lifetime position, have taken an ideology that says, hey, what do I really think ought to happen? What do I feel like ought to be a new direction for this country? So we've seen so much of that now in these last couple of decades. And as we do so, then you and I, as a part of this ongoing war against evil in our society, have an obligation to study, an obligation to really look and say, what are the sources of corruption? Can they be changed? To look and say, how do these people receive the position that they had to start with? And then looking at how they received that position to say, well, then how can that be affected? And to recognize that, like Supreme Court, state judges, they're all appointed. And as they're appointed, we say, then it becomes important to know who appoints them, and to recognize in the upcoming election that you and I have a responsibility to say, and who will most likely select judges who will support these basic rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Most basic of all, the right to life, without which no other rights exist or can be held. And we looked at abortion a couple weeks ago, and we need to be seriously thinking about euthanasia and the ongoing movement that is spreading across our country. It's already approved in several states. Already given to say, hey, you want to end your life? Because we don't have quality. That's the magical word you hear nowadays. Quality of life, whatever that is. So you don't have quality of life. Are you sure you want to be around any longer? Are you afraid you might be a burden to your children? Is this pain really worthwhile? So many questions that are being brought to us, especially those who are in the military. Getting a question here that would lead you to almost say, well, no, I shouldn't be here anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. And as we focus on that, more and more choose, not because they need yours, their free choice, but because of supposedly their love for others. Now today, we witnessed, just this past couple weeks, in Belgium, where euthanasia was approved before here, a 17-year-old having the right to end his life. Now, if a 17-year-old can end his life but cannot sign a contract, how can that make a sense? They cannot enter into legal obligations otherwise, but they can say it's all right to end an innocent life. You and I know that we do not give young people responsibility in much of any area that requires that kind of determination, much less in the ending of life. And so, as we watch that happening, we cannot but know and believe that the next step is also here in the United States. That young people will be allowed to end their life. And not just young people, because when young people cannot answer for themselves, then guess what? It's parents who feel burdened. It's a state that now is a ward of that child that says, this child will not ever have quality of life. It would be best for that child, for their, what happiness if you're dead, for their happiness to allow them to exit this world. That is where we are at today. And if you and I are not careful in what we are doing when we go to the polls, we will see that spread certainly within a very short time in this country. Today, let us, with Moses, with Timothy, recognize that yes, we must be persistent. Yes, we must come before the Lord in prayer. Always say, Lord, what direction would you have me go? How would you have me to vote? And recognize the responsibility that is truly incumbent upon each